I think the most freeing thing, but also the thing that we forget the most when you learn about law of assumption or manifestation, is that it doesn't matter the action you take. It matters the meaning that you give it, the assumption behind it. And so many of us feel so stuck because all day we constantly are making up stories and assumptions about things that are happening in our lives, and they're usually negative assumptions. And the truth is, if you are going to assume all day, why not assume the things that you want? And you will be shocked at how things change. And so, for example, my client, she owns a meal prepping business and she made shrimp a couple weeks ago. And she was like, this shrimp, I think everyone's gonna hate it. It's so bad. She was just making up assumptions, even though she has no idea if they would like it or not. And so I said to her, why don't you assume that everyone's obsessed with the shrimp, that it's actually the best dish that you have ever made? What happened next? A customer came into her store and they were like, I was obsessed with the shrimp. That's my favorite thing that you have made so far. Because it's not about the action, it's about the assumption behind it. And I do this daily. I filmed a podcast a couple months ago, and halfway during the podcast, I was like, what the fuck am I even saying? Is this even good? Like, is anyone even gonna listen to this? And I stopped myself. And on the podcast, I was like, I'm deciding that this is the best podcast ever, and you guys are gonna be obsessed with it. What happens next? I put the podcast out instead of, scrapping it and starting new, because I was like, it's not about the action I take. It doesn't matter if this podcast sucks. It's about the meaning that I am giving it. Because law of assumption, whatever you assume is what's going to happen in your reality. What happened next? I put out the podcast episode, and I have a past client reach out to me, and she was like, I knew this podcast episode was going to be good before I even clicked on it. And then I clicked on it, and I am obsessed with this episode. So what I want you to remember is you're not stuck. All those negative assumptions that you are currently making are not real. And you have the power to stop and choose something differently. And if you want to take it even a step further, stop letting yourself assume these things in the first place. How do you do that? By getting present, by letting yourself observe your thoughts and let them go. And guess what happens when you do that? Everything comes to you because you aren't resisting it. You aren't making stories about why you can't have it. So to recap this, you don't have to assume anything at all. But if you are going to assume something, why don't you assume something that you want? And I'm going to assume that this video was exactly what you needed to hear.